What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven, and today we are going to be looking at some highlights from Season 2. After my last video with Azumarill, Shiftry, and Galarian Stunfisk, a lot of people were asking if there were any more games that they could watch where I used that team. And while I don't have any more games that I wanted to showcase really where I used that team exactly, I've got a whole bunch of games and videos with a very similar team. That's subbing out that Galarian Stunfisk for a Registeel. I did a whole series on my channel called it Shiftry Week, so I've got 5 other videos that you can watch if you want to see this team. But there's also some footage that I've been sitting on for a while that I wasn't exactly sure when to release, and now seemed like a fine time to do so. So we are going to go into the vaults and check out some coverage with this team. All my commentary on it is previously recorded, but I think it still holds up pretty well. But we are going to be rocking this Azumarill lead with Registeel and Shiftry. So we're going to travel back in time now to the beginning of June, just about, and we are going to look at some Great League games from that time period when the Great League was first around at the beginning of Season 2. Now that said, a lot of these games are going to play out pretty similarly to how they would if I was rocking a Galarian Stunfisk on this team rather than a Registeel, and these are my favorite games from the Rank 8 gameplay at the beginning of the season during Season 2. So we got some fun games, and we're going to take a look at those now. So these are all going to be Rank 8 clips using my Azumarill, Shiftry, Registeel team, and first up, we are up against a Clefable, and this is a pretty tricky lead because it will actually beat Azumarill in the any type of shield matchup, just because Charm deals so much damage as a fast move. So I go ahead and switch to the Registeel to claim their Meteor Mash, eat a little bit of my opponent's energy, but then they get to bring out Lucario. And honestly, this is fine. I'm not going to shield Lucario's power-up punches. They are going to be able to counter-farm me down, but I am going to be able to get a shield out of my opponent's Lucario because they will have to shield this Focus Blast coming in. But then they get to counter-farm me down. I cannot switch into Shiftry, so we're going to go back into Azumarill now, and I will shield this power-up punch boosted Shadow Ball coming from my opponent's Lucario before unleashing a Hydro Pump. So my opponent is going to let their Lucario die. Lucario did its work. It beat up the Registeel, and I let Clefable charm down my Azumarill. Probably shouldn't have done that, but then I bring in the Shiftry to try to finish my opponent's Clefable off, but my Shiftry just took a ton of damage from the charm. Luckily, it is a Hypno. I needed my opponent's last Pokemon to be a really, really good match for Shiftry. We do still have a shield as well, and I think this Thunder Punch by my opponent's Hypno might have been a mistake. Because that is just one less confusion that they get to do. They're not going to be able to get to 2 Thunder Punches, and my Leaf Blade's able to take them down. It's tough to see. I might have had enough health to survive another confusion, but I just thought that was a great game. I really needed to get lucky on what my opponent's last Pokemon was, though, and Shiftry was able to claim the victory. For Game 2, we are going to be up against a Registeel with our Azumarill, and this is a pretty common matchup in the Great League. So we are going to, this is a good matchup for Azumarill. We're going to take the first Flash Cannon, and then based off the metagame, I do kind of mix it up here, but for this one, I just decide to go for the Hydro Pump. A lot of players haven't been shielding. And then I'm going to shield any Flash Cannons that come out of the Registeel, and now I just have to hit an Ice Beam, so it's going to be a lot more energy efficient here. So I go for this Ice Beam, and my opponent switches out onto their Azumarill, so they are able to waste my energy here. I'm going to go ahead and switch over into Shiftry, but my opponent is up a shield on us right now, so I will go for a Leaf Blade, and I think this will get shielded, so now we're even on shields, and this is honestly still a fine position for us. My opponent doesn't have that much extra energy right now, so we should be able to get to 2 Leaf Blades before my opponent can get to an Ice Beam. So I go for a Leaf Blade, this one gets the shield, and then I get a little bit greedy here, and I go for an extra Snarl, and my Leaf Blade is wasted. My opponent Ice Beams me and takes me out, so I now go into Registeel. And this is a super, super tough match from this point forward. So we are going to Flash Cannon my opponent's Registeel. They bring in their Registeel, so I switch over to my Azumarill and eat their Focus Blast. Now I should be able to farm my opponent's Registeel down and get back into this matchup a little bit. So I'm going to go for a Hydro Pump on my opponent's Azumarill. And I don't know exactly what was going on there, if they were trying to farm down, try to get some extra energy, but then they bring in the Altaria, and I have enough time to build up to an Ice Beam, and with my last Pokemon being Registeel, we were able to turn the matchup around, so my opponent throws in the towel there. I thought that I had completely thrown that match, but Azumarill and Registeel, with a well-timed switch, were able to bring it back to me. Now we're going to be looking at a game against another Charmer, this time Wigglytuff, and these Charming leads are pretty tough matchups, so I actually have a few of them in this highlight compilation, and I cut some as well, but we're going to go for the Ice Beam that gets shielded, and then I try to switch over onto Registeel, but they don't throw their move. They just go ahead and switch over onto Whiscash, so I'm going to go for a Focus Blast here to start things off, and that will even up the... Oh no, we're actually 2 shields to 0 shields now, so this is pretty decent for us. I'm going to just take these Mud Bombs. There's no point in shielding these Mud Bombs here. Let's just let the Registeel go. So bye-bye Registeel. We will get 1 Focus Blast in before we go, so that's why there was really no point in shielding on my opponent's moves. If I had used another shield, it's not like I'm going to get to another Focus Blast. So just let the Registeel go down there. I let the timer tick away a little bit before I bring in my Shiftry. And now I know my opponent's Whiscash has a bunch of energy, so I do want to go ahead and shield this Blizzard. But then I'm in a pretty good spot, and when my opponent fires another charge attack, this time I know it is a Mud Bomb. That's not going to deal any damage to Shiftry, so I just take it, keep doing Snarls, and then Shiftry has a bunch of energy, so I switch over to Azumarill to try to get some energy on Azumarill as well. Azumarill then gets to farm down the Whiscash, and when my opponent brings in their Azumarill, I am able to fire off a Hydro Pump. And this was a really good move for my opponent here to go into Azumarill, because obviously they don't want their Azumarill to line up against Whiscash. And here, this was the game I was actually thinking about. My opponent definitely trying to farm me here, generate some extra energy on their Azumarill, and then they will switch over into Wigglytuff to finish me off. So now their Azumarill has some Ice Beams loaded up on it, but we are going to, obviously we have to shield this Ice Beam from the Wigglytuff, but then I'm just going to overfarm here a little bit on the Wigglytuff, fire off a Leaf Blade, and this will leave me with enough energy to fire off another Leaf Blade against my opponent's Azumarill, and they built up all of that energy for nothing. I win the CMP tie, and I'm able to take Azumarill down. So that one got a little bit scary, but yes, Shiftry can farm against a charming Pokemon. Definitely not something you want to make a habit of doing, but it was pretty cool to do so, and I thought that was definitely highlight worthy. Shiftry farming against a Wishcash makes sense, but farming against a Wigglytuff is definitely scarier. So here we have the Azumarill mirror matchup, and it is a play rough Azumarill. I knew it was going to be a play rough because they did not have enough energy for Hydro Pump yet. Despite the animations being a little bit desynced, I was like, I don't think this is a Hydro Pump. I think it's a play rough, so I'm going to go ahead and shield that first Hydro Pump and take this second one. Take this second Play Rough. And then, let's see, I do think I'm going to go for another Hydro Pump against them and try to catch their third Play Rough on my Registeel. So let's see, I bring up the switch menu, switch to Registeel, and looks like I do get my opponent's Play Rough. So that's pretty good, waste a little bit of my opponent's energy here, and then they switch out into Umbreon. My opponent is up in shields, and the Umbreon switch makes a lot of sense from their perspective, even though Umbreon does take a lot of damage from Focus Blast. It does make sense because Umbreon lines up so poorly against my Azumarill. So they are going to hit me with a Foul Play. That looks like it might have even said Dark Pulse. Let's see. Okay, yeah, these are Dark Pulses here from Umbreon. We are going to go with a Flash Cannon on their Umbreon, and that is going to eat their shield, so that is a pretty good trade from my perspective. And then I will switch into Azumarill, and I will eat their next Dark Pulse. I'm not sure if this is a double or triple Dark Umbreon there, but they definitely have to get out. They switch to Skarmory, and now I am able to Hydro Pump this Skarmory, and that deals a ton of damage to that. So now we're going to see, they've built up a ton of energy. I'm going to go into Registeel, and I decide not to shield here. I'm just going to let Registeel go down and then bring out Shiftry. And the Skarmory already has enough energy to Sky Attack again, so I definitely have to shield this one, and then I decide to farm that Skarmory down. So another example of Shiftry farming against an opponent that you wouldn't think you want to farm against. I get a little bit more energy against this Umbreon before firing off a Leaf Blade there, and then we are back into the Azumarill, and I should be able to double Leaf Blade this guy before they get to a Play Rough or an Ice Beam. But especially if there is no Ice Beam on my opponent's Azumarill, this is pretty easy pickings, and there you go. Shiftry cleans up a counter sweep after farming down a Skarmory. So I definitely love those games where the Shiftry is able to farm something down that you wouldn't think it should be able to farm down. We're going to look at another game against a Clefable lead. I told you there's a lot of charm games here. My team is weak to two things. In particular, I would say it is a little bit weak to charming Pokemon, with Azumarill and Shiftry both losing against them. This opponent correctly does not throw the Meteor Match, so I don't get to catch that. But the other thing is fighting type Pokemon in the back. So that first game that I showcased with the Lucario in the back was particularly exciting to win. A Stunfisk shouldn't be as big of a deal, but I am going to go for a different approach against this Stunfisk. I'm actually going to double shield it with my Registeel and just fire off a Flash Cannon this time. I'm pretty sure this Flash Cannon will be able to get this shield, and then I should be able to switch out right before their Mud Bomb, and I switch into Azumarill. Azumarill does win this matchup. It's scary to not have shields, but the fact that I caught the Mud Bomb made them lose all of their energy. Now I can build up to a Hydro Pump and take out my opponent's Clefable. And if you remember, their Clefable had enough energy for a Meteor Mash, but they didn't want to throw it. If they throw the Meteor Mash, they kill the Azumarill. I get to go back into Registeel for free. So they tried to charm farm me down, but I still had a bunch of energy. Now we're Shiftry up against Stunfisk, and this is super easy. Shiftry can tank any of Stunfisk's abilities here, so I'm actually just going to keep on snarling and build up a bunch of energy here on my Shiftry and snarl farm them down. Then when they switch into Meganium, this is pretty straightforward. I just get to foul play it twice, and after this foul play comes out here, my second one, I thought about just trying to farm them down, but I didn't want to chance it, so I just go for a Leaf Blade to take them out. Their Stunfisk is almost dead and isn't going to be able to kill my Shiftry, so we take out the Meganium, and then we snarl that Stunfisk and get the win. So I thought that was a pretty unique game as well. My opponent was kind of in a tough position where they couldn't use their Clefable's energy. This game, though, is against a team that I think is really suited up against my team. Deoxys defense form is really tough to play against, and you see I try to switch to the Shiftry to catch this Thunderbolt, but it didn't quite work, so then I just switch to the Shiftry anyways. So we are going to start by shield baiting here with a Leaf Blade, and my opponent is going to shield that. So now I'm going to build up to a foul play, and my opponent definitely either has to shield this one or take a bunch of damage. So we've got both of their shields, and they're going to counter farm me down, and this Deoxys is a tough Pokemon to deal with for me. But at least we got rid of all of their shields. So we Ice Beam the Deoxys, that's not enough to take it out. And then I go for a shield, and then after I shield this Thunderbolt, I say, you know what? Azumarill has taken too much damage. Their Deoxys has way too much energy. Another Thunderbolt is coming. So I switch over to Registeel to take that Thunderbolt and get the lock-on farm down. Now, counter deals a bunch of damage to Registeel, but Registeel having a bunch of energy is obviously super good. My opponent brings out the Umbreon because they don't want Umbreon up against Azumarill. And Registeel, especially with all of this energy, despite not having that much health, Registeel is going to be able to take out the Umbreon. But they switch. They switch on the Focus Blast, which is huge. They eat my Focus Blast, but I say, you know what? That's fine. Now I can line up my Azumarill against their Umbreon, and I can just try to Flash Cannon this Hypno. So we go for a pair of Flash Cannons on the Hypno, and they are trying to farm me down. I switch to Azumarill, and I'm not totally sure if this was right or not, but I didn't want my Registeel to die with so much energy. I figured they were just trying to build up extra energy before taking my Registeel out, so I switch to Azumarill. I get a CMP tie on my Ice Beam, so I zero tap it, so that way I can farm down my opponent's Hypno. Then we see the Umbreon come back out. I go for the Ice Beam. I was close to the Hydro Pump, but I just didn't want to lose all of my energy here. So we go for the Ice Beam, and it was a CMP tie. So they are going to be able to take out my Azumarill now with their Last Resort, and then I can go back into Registeel, and I have all of that energy left over. I get a Flash Cannon on the Umbreon and take it out. That was a crazy, crazy game, and yeah, one of a really tough team from my opponent, but a whole lot of fun that game was. So we're going to look at another game now against Registeel. So I am sure I'm going to try to play this one out pretty similarly here. We're going to take the first Flash Cannon, attempt to throw a Hydro Pump, and then an Ice Beam, but they switch out. And they switch to Umbreon. So that is a little bit curious here because Umbreon is not good against Azumarill. But, you know, hey, I'll take it. So we are just sitting in here, and I do try to switch into Registeel to eat up my opponent's Last Resort. I thought that would have been nice, but I mistimed the switch by a little bit, so I just switch into Shiftry. I think, well, I don't really want Shiftry against Registeel, so maybe I will just switch into Shiftry here now. Shiftry can fire some Leaf Blades at Umbreon, those deal some good damage, and I'm fine if Shiftry takes some damage here. So Last Resort deals a decent chunk to Shiftry, half of its health, and I go for a Leaf Blade against Altaria. I'm a little bit slow on the Leaf Blade. I meant to say I go for it against Umbreon, and they switch into Altaria. So I waste a bunch of energy there. I thought the switch was coming, so I tried to stagger my charge move, but it wound up just benefiting them even more. So they go into Altaria, and they are able to take out my Shiftry. I tried to switch out, but they are able to take out my Shiftry. I go into Azumarill, and then I switch into Registeel. I should have just gone into Registeel. There might have even been a little bit of a glitch there where I tried to switch as my Pokemon was dying. I don't totally remember this game, but Registeel up against Altaria, that is going to be a pretty good matchup here. And then when my opponent brings in their Registeel, we are even on shields, but I am up pretty significantly on energy. So I go for a Focus Blast, they shield it, and then they're going to try to gain me in energy by going for a Flash Cannon. So I just don't shield this Flash Cannon here, and then I'm going to be able to get a Focus Blast off again, and I just totally wasted all of my opponent's energy, and I still have a shield. So Focus Blast takes out my opponent's Registeel, and then they bring in Umbreon. They will be able to finish my Registeel off. I'm not going to shield this Foul Play. But then I can go into Azumarill, and I will be able to take their Umbreon down. So this was a pretty good game for us. And when you're ahead like that in the Registeel mirror, one of the things that I think is great about Registeel and as a safe switch is that if you're ahead in energy, you beat Registeel. So getting to Registeel first and then knowing that they were going to have to bait me, let me have a lot of flexibility in that matchup. Now we're up against Umbreon lead. We already know how this one goes. Azumarill is pretty good against Umbreon, but they will fire off a Last Resort against us. Before I assume switching Pokemon, let's see, did they switch? I don't think they switched, so I think this Hydro Pump is going to land on their Umbreon, a decent amount of damage, and then they're just going to fire back a Foul Play. I think this is actually a pretty grindy matchup, if I remember correctly. They might actually just let their Umbreon go down, and then we might be in an Azumarill mirror. Maybe that's how this one goes. So another Last Resort over onto the Azumarill, and I'm going to just fire off an Ice Beam onto Umbreon. I could have taken it out with a Hydro Pump, but I go for an Ice Beam, and then I go for the Farm Down, so that way I have a bunch of energy for this Azumarill. So yeah, this is the matchup I was thinking of. Now it is Azumarill, and I'm going to go for a Hydro Pump. And my opponent is going to try to Bubble Farm me down. So they're going to get a bunch of energy on this Azumarill. I go for the Ice Beam instead of the Hydro Pump just to be safe. But my opponent has a bunch of energy, but they do take a bunch of damage because Bubble takes a long time to farm down. So I'm definitely going to shield here and protect my Shiftry. Then they switch out into Altaria, and I switch over into Registeel. So my opponent's Azumarill has a bunch of energy, and I am down a shield, but I have switch advantage, and both of my Pokemon line up pretty well against both of my opponent's Pokemon. So this should be a pretty straightforward game, but my opponent's playing it pretty well, and there's something a little bit different here that happens at the end that I think makes this matchup unique enough. So I'm going to go for these Flash Cannons, and it makes total sense for my opponent to shield these Flash Cannons and protect the Altaria. They don't shield that one, and they actually leave themselves with another shield, and I'm almost at a Flash Cannon. So it is very, very tempting to shield there, but if I shield, my opponent can shield my Flash Cannon, and then from there, they'll be able to farm down the Registeel, Sky Attack the Shiftry, and I will lose. So I let Registeel die, I Leaf Blade the Altaria just to speed things up a little bit, farm down the Altaria, and then I know that I can beat this Azumarill to a second Leaf Blade before they get to a second Ice Beam, or a third Ice Beam at this point. So we go ahead and shield this Ice Beam, and then I fire off another Leaf Blade at my opponent's Azumarill. But I just thought that was a really, really unique circumstance there. Registeel with almost enough energy to fire off a charge move. But if I shield that, I'm pretty sure I lose the game. I've got another pair of videos to showcase here as we finish out this video. So now we are up against Haunter, and if you've seen my Shiftry Destroys Haunter video, you know that I hate playing against Haunter because the Pokemon is just so tricky, and apparently Haunter has one last trick up its sleeve, a Sludge Bomb to absolutely destroy my Azumarill. So I just go for the Ice Beam here because I know they're going to shield it regardless, and maybe like a switch will happen or something weird. But then I go into Shiftry, and I have to shield even using my Shiftry because this Sludge Bomb would KO me. So I am able to Snarl farm the Haunter down, but I am not as ahead in the matchup as I would like to be. My opponent brings out the Registeel, and I do have a bunch of energy to fire off a bunch of foul plays here, so I go for the second foul play, and this one is going to get shielded. So once that gets shielded, I can actually switch into Registeel and shield whatever my opponent does here, and I will actually now be up in energy against my opponent. So that was a Focus Blast, and they switched to Azumarill, and that's a pretty straightforward switch because their Azumarill does not line up well against my Shiftry. So even though Shiftry is supposed to destroy Haunter, I didn't get as big of a lead as I would have liked in this game. So this game is going to be a little bit tricky even so. I build up a bunch of energy before firing off a Flash Cannon on my opponent's Azumarill, and my opponent is actually going to let me get to another Flash Cannon here. So I think they were trying to farm me down so that they could Ice Beam my Shiftry, but they are going to let me get to another Flash Cannon. So I actually switch into Shiftry now and throw it away on my opponent's Flash Cannon, and then again, I'm going to be ahead in energy, and am able to Focus Blast my opponent's Registeel down. So that was a super close game. We're actually going to look at another game against Haunter here, and apparently I think a YouTuber had put out a video on Sludge Bomb Haunter, because we're going to see another Sludge Bomb Haunter here. So I'd actually switched to not shielding against Haunter, so that way my Azumarill could just get out of the way, and I could start attacking it with Shiftry. I build up a bunch of extra energy though, and the Sludge Bomb almost just totally takes me out. Again, I go for an Ice Beam, but I was not expecting that Sludge Bomb at all. They're going to shield my Ice Beam, and then I will go into Shiftry. But again, I am going to have to shield this Sludge Bomb. So really not as big of a lead as I would like. And we could be in some trouble here. My opponent now brings out an Altaria, so I'm going to go ahead and switch into Registeel, which makes them switch into Registeel. And again, we are favored by switching into Registeel because we just have more energy than my opponent. So my opponent has to catch up to me on energy, and knowing this, I am not going to shield this Flash Cannon, and that once again wins me this match by predicting my opponent's shield bait. So we go for another Focus Blast on my opponent's Registeel, and then I am going to go ahead and shield this Focus Blast to keep my Registeel alive. This one's actually a Flash Cannon, so I am going to actually then switch to Shiftry That way I can just keep farming my opponent's Registeel down. So we let the Flash Cannon take me out. We go back into Registeel against Altaria, and I have a bunch of energy, so I should be able to Flash Cannon this Altaria down. It is going to need 2 Flash Cannons though, so we are going to have to build up a little bit more energy, but we were able to do so against the Registeel, and that is going to let us take this Altaria out. Then they bring the Registeel back in, and it is super close. It's really close, but we have just the tiniest little amount of HP over them, so we are able to win the game. So thank you guys very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed that little blast from the past. And like I said, I think that this team still holds up pretty well now. Registeel has gotten some nerfs, but you can also sub in a Galarian Stunfisk in its stead, and it works pretty well as well. I've moved on from this team a little bit, and in my next video, I'm going to be showcasing a team that counters not only this team, but also I think the meta at large. This team has gotten pretty popular, so I worked at the end of last season to try to find a team that could beat this team, and eventually landed on a team that got me a 65% win rate at the top of rank 9 in the Great League. So it's a really good team. I'm really excited for that video as well. So make sure you subscribe if you want to see that one, and I will be back soon. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace!